The canoe. Lupe, Lupita, give my little Pita a ride in your little boat. Chapter 17. The marshy lake stretched far and wide. Before us was covered in a misty haze. The sky above me was a deep purple gray, and on the horizon I could see the first rays of light pushing through, announcing a new day. Where are we? Villia and Dia asked in unison. Not where, but when, Juanita said, as we wandered along the shallow shore. The mist dissipated, exposing an entire community of canoes being steered by both men and women on the surface of the lake. Fishermen stood on their bobbing vessels, throwing nets across the dark, still waters. Native Mexican women, dressed in pale tunics, slid their paddles into the lake and rowed slowly, serenely across the water towards what could only be described as densely vegetated islands floating on the water. And as the sun's rays peeked out of the horizon, turning the sky into an amethyst haze, the canoe people sang in a language I never heard before. Their songs were filled with pleasure and warmth and life. What time is it? Juanita asked. It looks like the sun wants to come out, but it can't. Abula looked at the watch on her wrist, tapped it, put it to her ear, and shook her head. I can't tell. This old thing stopped ticking. Now what? Villia asked. I don't know, I said. Since we met La Larola, I never know what to expect. I was wondering what we were supposed to do when a young woman paddled her canoe to shore and docked right in front of us. You wish to go across? She asked. Across? I asked, looking at her canoe closely. It was not large, but it was big enough to carry all of us together if we choose to go aboard. To the other side, to your worlds, she said, smiling. The Great Mother has ordered it so. She has sent me here to help you, and I to take you back to your mother and your abula to Hernandez de Rendes. Yes, Juanita said. Yes, we all have to get home. The beautiful woman moved a bouquet of calla lilies out of the way and placed it over a basket full of fresh tomatoes, squash, and chilies to make room for us. We all scrambled onto the small vessel. Then we watched as she anchored her paddle against the murky lake's floor and pushed the little boat away from the shore. My name is Atexia, the beautiful young woman said as she rowed us out towards the middle of the quiet lake. The sky above us was blushing with the promise of sunrise. My eyes had adjusted to the mere light, and I could see details now. The men wore white tunics and pants that stopped at their ankles, and no shoes. The women wore tunics too, the length of dresses, but their hair was braided intricately and adorned with flowers and little stones I did not recognize. We are the Gaza girls, and this is our Abula Remendes, Juanita said, pointing to the rest of us. Itilia, can you tell us where we are? Why are we traveling back in time? You are not traveling back in time, Itilia said. You are moving forward, gliding across Texaco Lake, where your mother's people had made their home. I looked at the island of vegetation fenced in within the cluster of willow trees, creating the illusion of a heavy forested swampland. I've never seen so many little islands in a lake, I said. They are chipintes, the floating gardens that feed us. They provide us with everything we need to sustain our families. They are our livelihood. We are tenders, cultivators, nurturers, but this is more than a way of survival for us. It is our way of life. I reached out and touched the end of the muddy wooden stick and digging tools of some kind sitting next to a small wooden hoe besides me in the boat. So you're a farmer? I asked. Yes, Italia said, rowing slowly, carefully, as she watched the other boats around us, making sure we were not in their way. But I also harvest flowers, fragrant blooms to decorate the palaces, the house of the nobles, and the mainland. She lifted her paddle and used it to point to the left of us. I followed the gesture and gasped at the sight of a beautiful city that seemed to be floating in the middle of the lake, encircled by a magical mist, bedazzling us with the towering splendor. Complex cultures of stone buildings, so tall and imposing, they looked like gods rising out of the river, reaching for the sky. Tintitla, Abula said, looking in wonder at the great city looming over the swampy land. The Aztecs decided to build it here, on the lake. When they saw the sign, the eagle sitting on a cactus, eating a snake, it was the center of the great empire, the home of our ancestors. I watched Atilia row and row, taking us away from the city. Why are we so far away from home? I asked. This is the goddess's gift to you, she said. A vision to always remember who you are, where you came from, as you develop a better future. As Itella rode on, we passed a fisherman pulling up a turtle in his net and two women picking fresh vegetables from a floating garden. It's beautiful, your way of life. Thank you for showing it to us. And for giving us a ride, Peta said, inching closer to me. I put my arm around her and pulled her in beside me. You're welcome, Italia said, as she rowed away from the city and towards shore. It didn't even occur to me to wonder what language we were speaking. We just understood each other. We spent the next few minutes watching the fishermen pull up their nets in the subtle darkness before dawn. As I sat holding Peta close to me, listening to the soft songs of our ancestors working in the waters of Texaco Lake, I wondered what time of day it would be when we woke up from this wondrous dream. A chilly breeze picked up around us, and I saw the rest of the mist lift off the water, exposing a familiar shoreline. Look, Juanita said, pointing to the land coming closer and closer. It looks just like our swimming hole. Vilya and Delia jumped up in the boat with excitement as they finished Juanita's thoughts. The canoe rocked severely, and before Abula could pull the twins down beside her, it capsized. We all fell overboard, landing in the waters of our very own Edie in the Rio Grande. You're home, Peta screamed as we tried to stand up in the water. Vilya and Dia scrambled across the water to help her as Juanita, Abula, and I helped Izetta drag her canoe to shore. Juanita helped our grandmother out of the water. I'm sorry about this, she told Italia, who was standing in the riverbank, wringing the water out of her dress. Oh, don't worry, Italia said, looking up from her dress. It'll dry out before I get home. Thank you, the twins kept chanting as they held Peta up between them, her arms wrapped around their shoulders for support. Thank you for the pleasant company, Italia said, as the girls helped Peta sit down on a huge flat rock a few feet away from the shore. I held my grandmother's hand in mine. She was looking at Italia's boat, and I could tell she didn't want to get back in it. One last hug, Abula said. Her voice cracked and quivered with emotions as she leaned down and hugged me tight. I'll see you soon, I said. At my words, Juanita, Vilya, and Delia convened around us, trying to get one last hug out of Abula. Well, we'll visit you soon. We'll take the bus and come see you. We promise, they all said as they hugged her. Even Peta, from the place on the shore was calling out a similar promise. Our grandmother leaned down and hugged her before heading back to join Italia in her little boat. By the time she settled into her seat, Abula was crying so much she was rendered speechless. All she could do by then was wave at us. It'll be an honor bringing you home, Italia said as she waved goodbye. Then she anchored her paddle against the bed of the river and pushed her capulta off. They were gliding away as Italia said, "May the Great Mother be with you in all your travels, and don't forget to pick the flowers." The flowers? Oh, yes, the roses for Mama, I yelled back. Thank you for reminding me. We walked out of the water then and stood on dry land, watching Italia row away from us until she and Abula Ramirez were nothing more than a memory in a thin mist still hung over the Rio Grande. Let's go, girls. You heard the lady. I have to pick some roses, I said. The twins shouldered Peta between them, and they hollered and hooted all the way up the hill as we left the river behind. Our bodies were worn out, but we did not let that stop us. We hiked through the sparse woods, making our way carefully down the beaten path we had created that summer, the summer of the Mariposas. Only there were no butterflies anywhere. Maybe they were asleep, would awaken when the sun rises, a sunrise that seemed to elude us as we walked along. Peta looked more tired. The twins were doing their best to steady her by hoisting her arms around their shoulders and bearing most of her weight. But she still looked like she was ready to keel over. We had been walking slowly, carefully, for at least 20 minutes in the woods, became more dense, pushing the huckleberry bushes and the jardines de zarentas out of our way. When we saw light breaking over the hill to the left of us, we looked at it, the sun fully coming out. Delia said, stopping to admire the new dawn. No, that's something else. Juanita stepped forward to take a better look at the wooded area being illuminated. I think it's your roses. Let's go, I said. I headed into the woods in the direction of the glow. We were barely over the Sierra when we saw them to the right of us in a clearing, and yet another hill. Hundreds of snot-nosed butterflies hovering over dozens of rose bushes. The rose bushes clustered, bloomed joyously, their blushing white crowns illuminating the darkness we had endured for so long. The joy of finding the roses was short-lived, as I realized all our belongings were still in Abula's truck, sitting in the front of the Centellas de Naranjas Sanitas de Guadalupas, right where we left it before we were transported here. I don't have anything to cut them with, I said. Oh, I do, Vilya said, reaching into her pocket and folding a blade out of a complicated gadget that looked like 20 tiny tools in one. She handed me a small contraption. Here you go. Can I come? I can hold them for you. Okay. I looked at the others and smiled. This won't take long, I promise. Juanita took me by the shoulders, pointed me towards the hill, and gave me a tiny push to get me going. Go on. We'll wait here. Peta needs to rest, she said. Vilya and I walked all the way up the hill. That bright morning light illuminated our steps as we trampled through the bushes. When we got to the roses, we both stopped. We both gasped. Their pale complexion blushed with an iridescent splendor that made them look almost magical. Vilya touched one of them. Her eyes sparkled with admiration. They're beautiful. Yes, they are, I said. Come on, let's not waste time. Vilya stood just behind me as I started to cut the roses. When I handed her the first one, she untucked her shirt and pulled it forward, creating a bed for the blossoms. I carefully pressed the thorns off their steers with my forefingers and thumb before laying them in the cradle of her shirt. Their wide leaves trembled delicately as they lay one on top of the other. Vilya folded her shirt over the 10 roses I already given her. You're almost done there. I pricked my finger on a thorn and winced in pain. Ah, yeah. See what you made me do? Be patient. I'm almost through. I don't care if you take all day, but we don't have time. We don't have that kind of time, Vilya continued. What do you mean? I asked, sucking on my throbbing thumb. She tapped my shoulder and pointed down the hill. I think our ride is here. I turned around and saw them coming too. 2 Border Patrol trucks rolling up the hill with the headlights full force on us. Oh, thank God, I said, relieved. Now we don't have to walk. Well, I wouldn't be so happy right now. Or did you forget? Vilya asked, turning to look at me with a furrowed brow. Forget what? I asked, annoyed. I wasn't sure what she was getting at. Hello, Vilya retorted. We don't have our papers with us, and PETA is hurt. They're going to call CPS on us for sure.